You had the moral high ground, and you pissed on it. You walked into the Trump era with every advantage: the facts, the institutions, the votes, the culture. You had the language of justice, the aesthetics of virtue, the money, the reach, the global sympathy, and the moral high ground. And somehow, despite all that, you lost. You didn't just lose power, you lost credibility. You lost the trust of people who needed you. You lost the will to fight. And instead of learning from it, you just doubled down on shame, on smugness, on surface-level moral posturing that alienated everyone who wasn't already clapping. This isn't just about politics anymore. It's about betrayal. Welcome to the Ministry of Fukyu, where we tell the truth, tell it simply, and carve it into you with an obsidian blade forged in the cruel fires of truth and quenched in venom. Like, share, subscribe. You'll want a front row seat for what comes next. Part 1. You made Trump the only option. Trump didn't hypnotize the country. You abandoned it. You used your cultural dominance not to elevate, but to humiliate. You didn't persuade people to grow. You bullied them for not already knowing the script. You mocked working-class pain as ignorance. You dismissed rural anger as bigotry. And you branded economic despair as moral failure. People weren't turning to Trump because they were evil. They were turning to him because you looked at them like bugs. You thought you were the voice of justice, but you acted like royalty. Trump didn't rise from nowhere. He rose from the crater you left when you stopped giving a shit about people who didn't speak your language. Part 2. You gave up power to protect your brand. You had the numbers, you had the platforms, you had the energy, and you wasted it all curating your image. You didn't build power, you curated feeds. You didn't build movements, you built influencers. You traded blood for branding, sacrifice for slogans, and real confrontation for Instagram-friendly activism that never risked offending your social circle. You defanged yourself to stay marketable. You filtered the revolution through a Canva template. You held back every punch that might cost you a gig, a grant, or a seat at the cool kids' table. You didn't lead a resistance. You launched a lifestyle brand. And when that brand failed to move people drowning in real suffering, you blamed the audience. Part 3. You talked down, then wondered why no one listened. Every time you opened your mouth, it was to correct someone. You treated the country like a classroom, and yourself as the teacher who barely concealed their contempt. You didn't persuade. You preached. You didn't empathize. You diagnosed. You turned every disagreement into a pathology, every question into a microaggression. You couldn't speak human, only academic. You didn't see people. You saw problematic demographics, and when they stopped listening, you called them fascist. But they weren't radicalized by memes. They were radicalized by you talking to them like children, failing them like bureaucrats, and abandoning them like cowards. Part 4. You nursed institutions that were already rotting. You didn't defend democracy. You submitted to it like it was a church. You let the FBI, the CIA, the courts, and the Constitution babysit your principles while the other side waged war. You thought being technically right would save you. It didn't. You thought the law would stop them. It didn't. You treated broken systems like sacred relics instead of tools to be wielded or rebuilt. You fetishized democracy, but refused to fight for it. You stood in a burning house clutching a homeowner's manual, praying the rules would fix the fire. The other side brought gasoline. You brought your faith in decorum. Part 5. You branded cowardice as empathy. You called it compassion, but it was cowardice in costume. You mistook passive tolerance for strength. You elevated quietness as virtue. You silenced urgency in favor of comfort. You told the angry to calm down. You told the wounded to be patient. You told the brave to sit down until the paperwork was in order. And you wrapped it all in words like allyship and inclusion, pretending that your silence was some noble stance. It wasn't. It was fear. You were afraid to offend, afraid to fight, afraid to bleed. You let the language of healing become a reason to never pick up a sword. Part 6. You made everything about you. You took every cause and turned it into a mirror. Black lives mattered, as long as they stayed out of your gated neighborhoods. Trans kids needed protection, until your discomfort felt more important. Climate collapse was urgent, until the conversation got too depressing. You needed every movement to validate you, flatter you, and feature you. You couldn't march without a photo op. You couldn't speak without centering your own trauma. You didn't build coalitions. You built a stage. You didn't fight for justice. You used justice to promote yourself. And when the world didn't clap, you collapsed into self-pity and blamed your audience for not supporting your growth journey. Part 7. You had the moral high ground, and you turned it into a fucking gift shop. You had it all. The cultural capital, the righteous cause, the platform, the sympathy, and the goddamn numbers. And you pissed it away selling enamel pins. You turned progress into merch. You turned movements into panel discussions. You built nonprofits that laundered outrage into six-figure salaries. You had the one thing the other side didn't, the moral high ground, and instead of building something powerful with it, you sold it for Patreon subs and podcast deals. You let self-satisfaction replace strategy. You thought being good was the same as being effective. And now you sit on your pile of recycled slogans, wondering why nobody cares what you think anymore. Because they didn't stop believing in America. They stopped believing in its government. They didn't stop believing in truth. They stopped believing literally anything that came out your lying whore mouths. They didn't stop believing in justice. They stopped believing in you. If you've got the spine to face that, you know what to do. And if you've got something to say it in the comments. We're watching.